Blessings tonight. We have a few questions have come in. First is, why is the practice of offering Sanghadana so praised by Buddhists? Short answer is because it works. Brings you a lot of merit, a lot of good karma, not just this life but in future lives. So you might say it's a very good investment. Most investments will only bring you a return this life. So Sanghadana, Sangha means community of monks, and Dana means giving, generosity, or sharing maybe. So sharing with the whole community as opposed to what we call Patipukkalika Dana, which is specifying one individual. So, you come to a monastery, say, could be monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen living there, practicing. If you make an offering to one individual, well, that's useful, and maybe sometimes it's necessary, because sometimes somebody might have an individual need. However, it's not going to be quite the same in terms of your intention, what's going on in your mind, and then also in the result. It's not going to be the same as if you make an offering to support everyone. You're recognizing that everyone matters. Everyone in the monastery, whether the most junior novice or monk, or the most senior, the monk you like, the monk you don't like, whoever, they all matter, and you're supporting their aspiration for Nibbana. And you don't know also, maybe that quiet little monk at the end of the line may be a future Buddha or a future Arahant. So you wouldn't want to miss the chance to support him when you come to make offerings by just focusing on one. Kind of natural human behavior, isn't it? You may have a teacher or your beloved monk or nun that you focus on. You want to really support them. And that may lead you to ignore or neglect others in the practice. Maybe one day yourself, you'll be sitting there in a monastery somewhere. You'll also need support. So we can't just focus on the Buddha or the Arahant or the monk that we really love. We also have to focus on everyone's aspiration or potential for enlightenment. And that includes ourselves, includes others. So it's a kind of broadening of your mind when you have this approach. So that will generate many good results, good qualities of mind. It's just like when you practice samadhi, develop samadhi, say you might say on a single object, such as the object of metta, goodwill. But if your mind becomes one-pointed in the practice of metta, goodwill, all beings everywhere will benefit, because we call it apamanya, boundless, limitless state of mind. So it's not distinguishing this person but not that, this being but not that being. It's all beings will benefit. So it's the same kind of idea, making one's mind as pure and broadening one's attitude in that moment of offering dana, sanghadana, as would be the same when developing the one-pointedness on the object of metta or any other meditation object. You're going beyond the attachment to individual people that you like or don't like, and so on. And that's not to diminish the role of, say, seniority. In Sangha we have senior monks, elders, teachers. and juniors, and you still can recognize that when you offer Sanghadana. So the best Sanghadana, you might say, is the offering to the Buddha with the Sangha. You might recognize, oh, the Buddha is the Buddha, of course, but you're also recognizing the potential for enlightenment in all the others in the Sangha, and the Buddha praised that. Sometimes people, quite often I would imagine, wanted to offer robes or food just to the Buddha. But he would say, no, offer to the Sangha, you'll make more merit, you'll do more good. One individual will live one lifetime and then pass away. The Sangha, you offer Sanghadana, you're supporting the Sangha for the future generations, for yourself in the future as well as others. So you might say it's the best approach. That applies with everything you offer, whether it's accommodation, buildings, or construction costs, medicines, robes, food, other items, other things that can be used. If you pay an electricity bill for a monastery or whatever, there's many kinds of dana we can do. If one has the attitude of offering it as Sanghadana, then that's for the benefit of everyone who comes to practice in that place that you're making the offering. And that includes yourself. Just as a psychological thing, say you make an offering to one individual. If it is a monastic community where there's groups of monks, nuns living, how's everyone else going to feel? You focus on this one individual, and I'm not saying there'll never be a reason to offer to an individual. There may be a specific need, but if you just focus all your attention on one individual, how's everyone else going to feel? After a while, they may kind of feel a bit disappointed. You could say, well, that's their problem, that's their defilement. But you want to encourage everyone to practice. So you think if you're more sensitive, you're practicing kindness, compassion, then you naturally will also think of the other members of the community as well as the one that you like. Paul, why do I still feel anger when I know it is a mental defilement that I should let go? Well, I guess you could say you don't really know anger, if we're honest, because if you knew anger, or you know anger, you wouldn't indulge it, you wouldn't give it a place in your mind, in your heart. If you know it as suffering, a cause of suffering, if you know it as impermanent, as suffering, as not self, not to be clung to as self, you wouldn't cling. So if you are still clinging to anger, it means you don't really or truly know it. You probably have an inkling, otherwise you wouldn't have sent the question. You have an inkling, anger is suffering. Anger is not good. I don't want anger. I should abandon anger. We all do. We've heard, we've read, we've listened, we've thought about it before. We've noticed probably that when we're angry, we're suffering. Anyone who's practicing mindfulness, listening to Dhamma, meditates, will quickly probably come to that realization that anger equates with suffering. But that's only part of the story. You still have to practice to speed up your mindfulness and your insight and catch up with the anger. So you say, oh, anger is no good, let it go. But you've got to develop the skill to do that. And that takes practice. The first task is to identify the problem, isn't it? What's the problem? What's the cause of the problem? Me clinging to this feeling, unpleasant feeling, that has come with some perception maybe that something is not right, you don't like it. It could be a person, situation, an idea, a memory. Many things will trigger anger, but you're clinging to the negativity, that aspect of that particular thought or image or idea or sense impression. You're clinging, then because mindfulness insight isn't sharp enough, by identifying with that unpleasant feeling and the perception that comes with it, then you're laying the causes for further suffering. You start to become angry, we say. Anger has its starting point. Each time you're angry, there'll be a beginning to that anger. There'll be a period of time when you weren't angry, you were neutral, you were ordinary. Then you hear something or see something or think of something or remember something, and then you have an unpleasant feeling arise at that moment. I think most people will agree, but it's fast, it's quick, it's fast. Often it's habitual and we're often not very mindful. So it's fast, the unpleasant feeling arising, and then stimulates what we call craving, particularly vipawadana, craving not to become, not to have, not to be, or in simple terms, I don't want this. So whatever it is you don't want or you associate with I don't want, you're clinging to the feeling, that perception, and then you start proliferating. The mind starts thinking, why do I have to put up with this thing that I don't like, I don't want? And you get maybe a stream of thought, or at the very least a feeling that continues because you're attaching to it, clinging to it with delusion. So knowing anger in the sense to actually abandon it as a cause of suffering, you have to prepare yourself through the practice, developing mindfulness, reflecting, understanding the whole process, your cause and result, the different factors that lead up to anger, encourage anger, support anger, the actual experience of anger, how it feels, what it does to you physically and mentally, psychologically. Then the results of anger after it passes, how do you feel afterwards, what made it pass, what makes anger fade out from your experience, what do you have to do, what can you do. You're learning a whole range of things, but the idea, I think, is to get to the point where anger arises out of past karma causes, but you know straight away, this is suffering if I cling to this, so you let it go. As the Buddha said, it's a kind of fire, isn't it? If you cling to fire, you get burned, so don't cling to it. The more clearly you see that anger is fire, the quicker you drop it, the quicker your mind returns to normality. And when you experience a state of samadhi, so you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, which we were reciting the sutra on mindfulness of breathing tonight, you can overcome anger by focusing on the breath as a meditation object. And when your mindfulness is continuous, the mind becomes steady, aware from moment to moment. There's mindfulness, there's clear comprehension, there's effort, what we call atapi. You could say there's no room for anger to arise. Can't get in, can't get its foot in the door because mindfulness is there with the breath. Anger is a hindrance, and all 5 hindrances drop away when your mind is focused on its object in the practice of samadhi. So anger can't get its foot in the door, so you can overcome anger with mindfulness of breathing. Other times you may overcome anger with some wise reflection. Like when you're a kid, maybe you get angry with another kid at school. You go home and you complain to your mum. She'll say, don't talk about them, don't think about them, forget about them, or something like that maybe. you can do that in situations. You just learn to turn your mind away from whatever it is that's stirring up your anger, and you put your mind onto something more skillful, more wholesome, and you can abandon that anger that way, by seeing it, the harm of feeding and holding on to the angry thoughts, turning the mind to something better or different. So there's many ways we can learn to abandon anger, but it's a study, it's something you're learning about as you practice, and not just during meditation, but during any time in your life, in your day. So even the Sotapanna, stream enterer, still experiences anger. Sotapanna's first level of enlightenment, a noble one, still has anger, but it's not so strong that it leads them to break the precepts. So the mosquito starts biting them, and they feel the little pain, the itch of the mosquito. It's annoying, but they don't have the thought, the intention to kill the mosquito. The Sotapanna still experiences painful legs when they meditate, or Sotapanna still experiences somebody being rude to them or criticizing them in a very negative way. But they don't hold on to the angry reaction. They may have some initial anger arise in the mind, but they quickly abandon it because they know it as a defilement. So they really do know anger as a defilement. For what we call anagami, a non-returner, they don't even have anger. It doesn't arise for non-returners and arahants, enlightened beings. You can see anger is something you're learning about and learning to abandon, and it's almost like your skill in doing it, how quickly you can do it, how well you can do it, how effectively you can do it. It's a whole area of practice. And sometimes it's enough if you've abandoned anger before, you just tell yourself, I've let this go before, I'm going to let it go again. And you get strength from that. You've done it before, you can do it again. Sometimes by cultivating the opposite, kindness, compassion, sometimes forgiving, sometimes reflecting on the suffering of holding on to angry thoughts, angry feelings. There's a range of ways that you come to this final conclusion, it should be abandoned, and you do abandon it. And if you can do it once, you can do it again and again and again until it's so weak it hardly comes up at all. This is the way the Buddha said anger is overcome by non-anger, or goodwill. It's not overcome by more anger. Another question. Dear Lumpur, is it appropriate for a practitioner to regard an Ajahn as his or her teacher even though they have never met them before? Is it just a perception that the image of the teacher appears during meditation to aid the meditator in their practice? Thank you. Well, if you're watching this and you have an interest in Buddhism, you may even call yourself a Buddhist. You're probably viewing the Buddha as your teacher, your highest teacher, your refuge. But you won't have met the Buddha this life, will you? Because the Buddha died a long time ago. So it is possible to have a teacher who is no longer with us or you never meet. But how do you take the Buddha as a teacher or refuge? Well, you read about the Buddha, you read about the Dhamma, the teachings that the Buddha gave, explain how suffering arises and then how to abandon suffering. You listen to living teachers as well, but you're first of all absorbing information about the Buddha and who the Buddha was and what the Buddha taught. And then you aspire to emulate these same qualities. So you're starting to develop, you might say, the Buddha within, or the teacher within. And that's the same with the Sangha. Like the Sangha as the third refuge is, we say, the noble ones, those enlightened beings who practice what the Buddha taught, the Dhamma, and realized one or more of those stages of enlightenment until they reach Nibbana. So you can take refuge in the Sangha. That may be living Sangha, living teachers. But the important thing is they are people who have embodied the practice, done the practice, developed the same qualities as any enlightened being. They practiced in the right way, the way for overcoming suffering. They've cultivated the Noble Eightfold Path. They've done that sincerely, correctly. So again, just as you can aspire to follow the teachings of the Buddha and cultivate the same qualities of a Buddha in your own heart, or you can cultivate these qualities of one who's practiced well, the noble ones in your own heart. So Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha ultimately become refuges in your own heart, in your own mind, and then are displayed through your practice, what you do, what you think, what you do, what you say. So in that way, it is possible to practice Dhamma, as long as you hear Dhamma, good Dhamma, correct Dhamma, or read it, it's possible to practice without yet meeting a teacher. However, if you do meet a living teacher, I would say it's going to speed things up, because, as you're probably aware, when you read or hear Dhamma teachings, maybe even as you're listening to me speak, your own opinions, your own views, your own perceptions will come up right away. You miss things, or you resist things, or you argue, or you don't believe something, or you go in a different direction. And that often slows us down. Whereas you meet a living teacher, often they can teach you more directly, and they're also a living example of the practice. You see them, you feel them, you live with them maybe, or meet with them. Often it's a quicker, more direct way to understand the Dhamma. Best of all is you study the Dhamma and you meet living teachers, or a living teacher. Together, those two things will give you great insight into how to practice, what to do, a good example to follow. Still, it's up to you. And people would meet the Buddha and still not even recognize the goodness of the Buddha or the wisdom of the Buddha. Some people just saw him as competition. They wanted to be a teacher. They didn't want to listen to the Buddha or accept his teachings. They wanted to be a teacher themselves. Or they're jealous of the Buddha, and that was a blockage. They didn't want to listen to what the Buddha had to say. They're jealous, and the Buddha was successful and praised by many people and had lots of students. They were looking more in the superficial context of who a Buddha was, and they're just jealous of the Buddha. Or some people were just so caught up in their wrong beliefs, they're not ready to listen to the Buddha and his teachings, the Dhamma. So even a Buddha couldn't persuade or inspire everyone to follow. Same with any other teacher, what we call sāvakas of the Buddha, students of the Buddha, and particularly enlightened students of the Buddha. Ajahn Chah, in our lifetime, he was a great teacher and many students, and he had great skills in teaching, but he couldn't teach everyone. Some people turned their back on him, argued with him, walked away, weren't interested. Every teacher will experience that. There are those they can teach and those they can't teach. So you also have to look at yourself. Are you ready for a teacher? Do you have the right qualities to meet a teacher and benefit from a teacher? So it's a two-way thing. There's the teacher and there's you. And it's a relationship, and how are you approaching this relationship? Do you respect teachers and teachings, or the teacher and the teachings from that teacher? Do you respect them? If you don't respect a teacher, you're not going to get so much from them. Maybe you kind of ignore them, or turn your back away, or you're distracted, or you mumble and grumble. when you meet the teacher. And sometimes teachers do that, not deliberately necessarily, but they give you a teaching, and maybe your own defilements, your own sense of self, your own views and opinions, your own attachments resist. So a teacher out of compassion and wisdom may give you a good teaching and still you don't get it, or you don't want to get it. I used to live with Ajahn Lumorcining for a while. He had one monk from Malaysia, by chance, who was living with him and wouldn't practice what he taught and wouldn't listen to him. So one morning he gave him a kind of a very direct, stern teaching about how stubborn this monk was. He just wouldn't listen, wouldn't follow the instructions. And Lumorcining grabbed one of the wooden posts of the meditation hall and started banging his own head against this post. Very gently, he wasn't hurting himself. He was just giving a visual impression of this monk's mind. He said, "This is your mind." Bang, 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 bang. You're banging your head against a post. I think the English phrase is banging your head against a brick wall. He was saying, "I can't get through to you," or "you're not listening," or "you're not getting it." So sometimes even monks can be very stubborn or opinionated, lay people even more so. That's one danger these days, isn't it? You got choice, so much choice. If you're not happy with what one teacher says, you'll go and find another teacher who maybe fits your views. If your views are good, then that's okay, but if your views are wrong, then you're just looking for someone to back up your wrong view, or you're going to slow down in the practice and make mistakes and maybe create suffering for yourself. And unfortunately there are some deluded teachers out there, or teachers with wrong view. So if you get the wrong teacher, maybe you like that teacher because they seem to give you what you want. You agree with what they say or the way they do things, and then they can lead you in totally the wrong direction. Someone like Angulimala in the time of the Buddha, he had a teacher who told him the way to enlightenment is killing people. So if you have a teacher like that, you're in trouble, aren't you? Most teachers wouldn't teach you to kill people to get enlightened, but they might teach you to do other things which are not wholesome, not skillful, not wise. That's possible. Or maybe the teacher is well-meaning, but they're just deluded. So you do have to be a bit careful of your own opinions and views, and check them, test them against the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, against the suttas, against teachers that maybe have good reputation. It's not an absolute guarantee, but it's one factor, isn't it? So check your own views and opinions, and if you're resisting, maybe you meet a teacher, a meditation master or a teacher, and you're resisting them or disagreeing with them, you have to ask yourself why. Where's that coming from? Is it coming from wisdom, or is it just coming from your own conceit, views? And that can happen. So, be warned. But a living teacher is a good thing, because they get to know you. Maybe they can really give you some direct advice that's useful for you. Dear Lumpur, lately I have been battling with drowsiness during meditation. Will standing meditation help to counter the drowsiness? How does standing meditation work? Do we close our eyes and watch our breath while standing up? Thank you. You can try it. That would be my first advice, is just experiment, try. Does standing meditation work for you? And when we say try something, well, don't just try it for 3 minutes and then quit. You have to try it maybe for a period of time regularly, for periods like 15 minutes standing every day for a month. Then you may be able to form an opinion about whether it's helping you or not. The way I learned to do standing meditation from Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Mahabua, two very great meditation masters, was to practice walking meditation, which I used to do a lot of. I still do, but less than before. But I used to do a lot of, many hours a day. And what you find is when you become calm, quite naturally your mind sometimes wants to gather together, all the samadhi energy wants to gather together, and at that point you want to stop. And your mind goes inside, internally, which means you have to stop moving because you don't want to be looking at where you're walking and balancing, and even walking requires some attention. So when your mind gathers together in samadhi, maybe you stop, stand still, let your mind go in. Maybe you close your eyes and you're aware of your body from the inside, or you're aware of the breath, or you just go in, just with the mind itself. And if you're really peaceful, that could be for half an hour, even longer. Or sometimes it's just for a few minutes. It depends partly on your state of mind, how peaceful you are. But if you're in a jungle situation where there's a lot of bugs around, it can be troublesome. I've had what Marpjan, where I used to live, sometimes I'd be walking meditation and get really peaceful, and I'd stop walking. My mind would go into samadhi. I'd either be contemplating something like the body or some aspect of the Dhamma, or just with the peaceful state of samadhi. Meanwhile, all the mosquitoes who'd been following me while I was walking but hadn't landed on me, now they got their chance. So if you stand still for 15 minutes in the Thai jungle, you get eaten alive. So when you come out of samadhi, open your eyes, think, I'll start walking again. It's like, why does my leg itch? Why does my shoulder itch? Because I got all these mosquitoes all over me. Occasionally even something bigger. So probably a few times been walking and then stood still, going into samadhi, and then either in samadhi, maybe not in deep samadhi, can still hear and sense what's going on around, or sometimes in deep samadhi, then coming out, you hear the leaves crackle. There's a certain crackle of the dry leaves in the summer, and you open your eyes and and some snake has come up while you're standing there. Who knows whether they're attracted by the peaceful atmosphere of the meditator, or they're just coming by anyway. So I once had a massive king cobra come by me so closely, all he would have had to do is just put his tongue out and he would have hit my foot. And he was huge, but I came out of samadhi, so I had no chance to do anything other than watch him. So I thought in my mind, if you want to get me, you can, because I'm here and you're right there. So I surrender. I said, I surrender, you win. And I just watched him, and he watched me. He turned, when I thought that, he turned and looked at me, and then he just carried on. But he was massive, huge, and could have killed me very easily, but he didn't, luckily. So sometimes that happens. Or as Ajahn Mahabua used to say, you stand still in the middle of walking meditation, you stop, you stand still, your mind goes in to samadhi. When you come out, if you're not careful, you can lose your balance. Because when you're in samadhi, you forget your body. When you come out, the perception of your body comes back and it's, so you could fall over. So he used to say, if you can, get a handrail next to your walking path, so you can grab the handrail. But that's standing from walking. But you can just stand, you can also experiment with that, especially if you're indoors in a house or a place where you've got limited space, or even in a kuti if you're in the forest and it's raining or something. You can do standing meditation. You just consciously, mindfully, with awareness stand for a period of time. And you'll learn many things. You'll see the desire to walk or to move. But the idea is you just watch that desire arise, pass away. You can follow the breath, you can contemplate the 32 parts of the body, you can spread metta, there's a whole range of objects you could pick while you're standing. So it's quite good for practicing in confined spaces, or between periods of sitting you stand for a while just to allow your leg muscles to relax, and then you sit again. from what I've heard of, the monk who is most famous for standing the longest with the deepest samadhi and probably the greatest endurance is a monk called Lumorcining, who lived in Ubon on the banks of the Mekong River, although he started his life practicing in Laos. And he was a great meditator. Even he had jhana before he was even a monk. So he's a lay practitioner with jhana. So it can be done. But he's a very dedicated meditator. And there was a period of time where he was doing standing meditation in the forest for days and days and days and days. He wasn't going anywhere, he was just standing in samadhi. He stood so long that the termites started to come up and make a little termite mound around his feet. If you know the forest, you get these termite mounds, we get them here as well. They take a long time to make, but they have to start somewhere. So they get earth and they start making an earth mound, very shallow, small at first, like a little mountain of earth. And they usually make them around dead trees, things that don't move. So they obviously thought his feet were a dead tree. I would say probably the jhana, the metta, the goodness of his state of mind probably attracted termites, because even termites will be attracted by metta. So they started building their home around his feet. And then some villagers came through and saw this, and they thought, oh no, there's this monk and there's the termites building their home around his feet, we better scrape them away. So they started scraping away this termite mound. And that brought Lumpur out of his samadhi, and he wasn't very happy. He said, what are you doing? Leave me alone. Shooed them away, so they had to go away. So if you think you're good at standing meditation, well, you have to do it to the point where the termites make their home around your feet to be really good. Last question. Why is it important to practice a supa meditation? A supa. Supa doesn't mean super as in wow, amazing. Supa in Pali means beautiful, beauty, the characteristics of beauty. So asupa is the opposite, the unbeautiful, the unattractive. It's a perception, like so many perceptions, you can use them as meditation objects to kind of balance up your thinking and the way you look at things, because we're living in what we call the Gama Loka, the sensual realm, the sensual sphere. We have senses, eyes, ears, tongue, nose, skin that touches. We feel things, sense things. Kamaloka is associated with desire, sensual desire, things we like to see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and the lust and the stronger kinds of sensual desire that come with that. And this is a big problem. Anyone who meditates will know it comes up all the time. And even if you don't meditate, you're probably aware that you have sensual desire. Many people don't see anything wrong with it. They say you should, it's natural and you should indulge it. That would be the way of what we call Gama Sukhalikana Yoga. The way of sensual indulgence, sensual desire cannot bring you to enlightenment, to wisdom, to full knowledge of suffering and the end of suffering. So it's one of the ways the Buddha said we have to turn away from, go to the way of mindfulness, the Noble Eightfold Path, heedfulness. So one way of bringing your mind back to the middle is contemplating the opposite of all these sense objects that you like and want, well, what you don't like, which is there already. It's not like you have to create or find anything, it's there already. So say like when you consider the human body, your body or someone else's body, just ask yourself, when you look at someone or think of someone in your mind, what do you think of first? Usually it's the bits you like. Whatever your gender, doesn't matter, you'll think of the bits you like, the skin, the hair, the shapes, the smells, the fragrance smell, all the good bits that you like, whatever your character, whatever your particular likes and preferences, that's what you think of most often. But a human body comes as a package, and you get the bits you don't like. And we try to ignore them, cover them over. We wear clothing, we wear beauty products, we cover all the unattractive bits up. When we make smells, we spray things to get rid of the smell. We don't like the things that come out of this body, the excrement, the urine, the vomit, the sweat, the grease. We try and get rid of all that all the time. We wash our clothes, we beautify our dwelling place, and so on. We try and hide from the unattractiveness of the body, and therefore our mind is living with a lot of delusion. There's a lot of suffering from this. You could save a lot of money by reducing the amount of beauty products that you buy, probably. And, because we're attaching to beauty, we therefore tend to resist and get away from the unbeautiful. A lot of the dynamics of human existence are around this. You go towards what you want as beauty and what you're attracted to, and you go away from what you don't like. It could even lead to conflict, can't it? It can lead to conflict between people, jealousy, envy, disparagement, conceit, all kinds of suffering. So the Buddha gave this as a meditation object. It's part of the first foundation of mindfulness of the body, kaya gata sati. Focusing on the unattractiveness of the body, very closely linked to the impermanence of the body, the suffering of the body, and the lack of self in the body. Body is not self, gets old, gets sick and dies. And we can't stop that. The body is suffering, gives us lots of pain, lots of problems, and doesn't do what we want, and it gets old and sick and dies. And the body is impermanent, that's pretty clear. And then asupa is like the fourth perception. It's not talked about so much because it's not universal, because there's the attractive, there's the unattractive, they're like two opposites. But it's because we're so obsessed and caught up with the attractive, we need to develop the perception of the unattractive to kind of pull your mind back to normality. So we do that in many different ways. We contemplate the 32 parts of the body, and particularly their unattractive side. You notice things about this body more and more the more you practice mindfulness. Whether you practice mindfulness of breathing or loving kindness or any kind of mindfulness practice, you'll start to be more aware of the way things are, which includes the unattractive, unpleasant, ugly side of the human body, in you, in others. You notice the blemishes as much as the beauties and the attractive bits. You kind of open up to reality. But sometimes you actually develop particular objects to help. So another meditation we do is what we call corpse meditation, where you can use your imagination. Imagine yourself as a corpse or someone else as a corpse. What does it look like, a corpse? And there's many stages of decomposition, from newly dead to skeletal. Smells. If you've ever been with a corpse, it's very smelly, unpleasant, and it doesn't have to be a human corpse. It could be a mouse or a bird or a dog or something. You can use animals, corpses, to help you get these perceptions and focus on them. You can use your imagination. You can use information you can get from the world around you, or sometimes you use the real thing. So monks even sometimes go to autopsies, and a doctor will explain about the human body from the inside as well as the outside. There's a whole range of data and information you can use for this meditation. And for someone who's maybe done it before, maybe when they're peaceful, quite naturally an image of a dead body or a part of the body will arise during meditation. Without them even trying, it can arise spontaneously, Or sometimes people create them or focus on them in meditation as well. There's a variety of ways you develop the perception of the unattractive. And it just helps to counter this tendency to always be imagining and fantasizing and desiring beauty. And it doesn't have to be even just the human body. So you can look at a beautiful tree and just bring up the perception, and one day this tree will be old and die, fall over or wither away, or a flower. And then people have become enlightened, focusing on flowers. Like it's the way, if I remember rightly, the Buddha gave one person the perception of beauty first, because they're so obsessed with beauty. It's very difficult for them to jump to the perception of the ugly, the unattractive. So the Buddha said, just focus your mind on a lotus flower, a beautiful lotus. Just keep recollecting it, visualizing it, focusing your mind on that. And they can do that because they're attracted to it, and it's nice to think about and see. But what happens over time? If you keep focusing on a beautiful lotus, after a while it withers, it dries out, we say it dies. If you're still focusing on it, you can't help but notice, oh, my beautiful lotus is now withered and become all dry and horrible. It becomes smelly, becomes unpleasant, unattractive. You can't help but notice that. If you become focused and mindful of a beautiful lotus, you'll get to see the unbeautiful lotus as well, that lies within the beautiful. And that's the aim of it. You may have to start with beauty, but then you work towards, you see the full cycle of impermanence and attractiveness going to unattractiveness, to death, to change. You can do it that way, and people become enlightened like that. So sometimes they say, like some of the teachers I used to live with in Thailand, they say, enlightenment is when you know, or you might say the step towards enlightenment is when you know the corpse in your own body. You have no more doubt about that, no more confusion. And this body is bound to die. It's like a walking corpse. And monks, sometimes we joke about this. We joke about these things because it helps lighten it up when you're contemplating death or corpses. When you look at a person, pretty much everything you see is dead cells. Otherwise we'd be in agony, because it's the dead cells of the skin, of the hair, the nails, the teeth that are in contact with the world. And if you didn't have them, all your nerves would be exposed. It'd be very painful to be in the world. That's why when you get a cut, a raw cut with the flesh inside opened, it's painful because your nerves are exposed. It's also ugly to see flesh. Say when you have an injury, it's ugly, but it's also painful. So when you look at someone, you're just seeing a dead person, even though they're alive. It's because the cells and the superficial part of the body is all dead cells. That's just an interesting reflection, isn't it? We look at each other and say, oh, your hair is really nice today, but it's all dead. Or your hair is really ugly, but it's all dead. Same. So then, by extension, say you hate someone, you're angry with them, I hate you. There's another way you can practice a super. Do you hate my hair? Do you hate my fingernails? Do you hate my skin cells that are all dead already? After a while it's like, you sort of, even anger can diminish under the influence of a super meditation. Lust, anger, fear, worry, all the different defilements are actually calmed and even abandoned through a super meditation. Not self can be realized. Oh, this body is not self, it's not mine to control. I don't own this body. Other people don't own their bodies. So actually it's a doorway into vipassana meditation and the gaining of wisdom and insight that will free our mind from delusion. But you have to go slowly maybe if you're new to it. It's not easy because we don't like it. Most people don't like contemplating the unattractive aspects of the world or themselves, their body. So you have to go slowly, gently, work up to it. Otherwise you can become a little depressed or have a reaction where you just feel very negative and don't want to do it. So you have to monitor yourself as you're doing this meditation. So that's probably enough for this session, and we'll now pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.